Welcome. Thanks for joining us today. Let us know that you're watching by texting here to the number that's going to be on the screen. Also, if you have any questions, comments, or have a prayer request, feel free to drop them in the comment section below. We have some information and some announcements for you before we dive in. Check them out.
Hey, Real Life. Last week we had our Easter services here at the Coeur d'Alene campus, and it was amazing. We had people who showed up, celebrated, worshiped together. Our worship was amazing. All of our services were packed, and Pastor Blake reminded us that we are empty tomb people, that we're living in the light of the resurrection, that we've been called to something as we try to reach the world for Jesus one person at a time, and as we try to make disciples. It was an amazing time. Thanks so much for coming. Thanks so much for inviting those people to our services. Got a couple announcements for you. First of all, for you ladies, I want to remind you that on April 13th here at the Coeur d'Alene campus, starting at 6 p.m., we have our Ladies' Night Out. It's a great time for women to come together for fellowship, play games, make some connection, and have fun. Games start about 6:30, and for you ladies who come regularly, just want to ask you, invite somebody. This is another opportunity to get more people involved and get connected here at Real Life Coeur d'Alene. Second of all, for you guys, most of you know that we have been having a monthly men's breakfast. So this 17th of April, we're going to be meeting here at the Coeur d'Alene campus at 8 a.m. Great time of fellowship. We have good speakers coming, good food. It's just a time for you guys to come together, spur one another along. We get to talk about men's topics and just kind of spur each other along as we pursue our relationships with people and with Christ. So come, invite somebody. Starts at 8 o'clock. Hope to see you there. Last thing I want to bring to your attention is that on April 18th from 1 to 3 here at the Coeur d'Alene campus, we're going to have our membership class. This is a great way for you to come and hear what we believe, some of the things that we stand, why we do the things we do, and it's also a great opportunity for you to have conversations with some of our pastors here. You don't have to do anything other than show up. We're going to have some food for you, and we'd love to get you connected, give you some next steps, so hope to see you then. Hey, so we're about ready to jump into the sermon. This week we're starting a brand new series called Return of the King, all about end times. And this week our lead pastor, Jim Putman, is going to be bringing the message. I hope you guys are excited for this series. I know that I am. Hope you got your Bible. Hope you got your pen. I hope you're ready to see what God has in store. Let's get started.
The worries of this world continue to increase, growing worse every day. Is the end near? What does that mean for us? What are we watching for? How do we prepare for the return of the King?
Good evening. Well, we're starting a series called Return of the King. And we are looking at the question of what do the end times look like? What does it look like when Jesus returns? Now, we chose to do it at this time for a couple of different reasons. There's so much going on. There's so much upheaval going on in our current, in America, around the world. There's things like pandemics. There's things like natural disasters, an increase in natural disasters. There's political upheaval. I mean, many of us are watching the America we grew up in change so rapidly, socially, culturally. It's just mind-blowing. We're seeing things like mental health issues skyrocket across America, not just with adults, although huge numbers of adults are dealing with this, but so many kids. And there's so much chatter over the internet. And like so many things, there's conspiracies, there's all kinds of Q documents, and you name it. You want to find something wacky, you can find it on the internet. Can I get an amen on that? And so there's all kinds of questions going on. And so we have chosen to take on this series at this time. And I'm going to be real honest with you. I'm not real crazy about doing it. In fact, I think I might be crazy to do it. So let me give you a couple of reasons why. First, I would say that the Bible itself tells us to be careful about predicting things when it comes to the return of Christ. We're to be careful about that. Jesus himself said that no man knows. Jesus doesn't know. No man knows. The only one who knows, this was Jesus in Matthew 13, he said, the only one who knows is God. And so we're told not to set dates. We're told not to make declarative statements like that. God's the one who knows. And the scripture says that when the return of the king comes, it'll come like a thief in the night. In other words, very unexpected. We're going to talk about that in the next few weeks. So I want to be careful about being predictive or declarative in any way. Because there's another reason. All throughout history, there have been all kinds of things. This is the first time there's been an upheaval of a variety of different kinds. All throughout history, it's gotten bad as one country fell and another country took over and this war happened and that war happened. I mean, imagine being in Germany in the 40s, the late 30s and 40s. I mean, just a case in point. Hitler comes along, World War. He wipes out the Jewish people. He's just evil. And he's got such a following, and so many said he's the Antichrist, and there's all of this. And so this isn't the first time this kind of stuff has happened. And depending on where you are in the world, there have been terrible things going on in other countries while we've been pretty protected over here, right? We start having it bad, we start crying tribulation. Ask a Pakistani Christian what it's like to live in Pakistan, right? Your wife can be taken and raped. Your children can be taken away. You have to actually go in, if you become a Christian, you have to go in and get a different ID card. I mean, what's going on around the world, it's been pretty rough. So I want to be careful about being declarative, and I want to make the point that this is the first time it's been really bad. So you got to be careful on how you handle this. There's other reasons why I'm a little bit concerned. I'm one of those guys who early in my Christian walk, I was very interested in Revelation. You know, I'd come to know Christ through apologetics, Christian evidences, looking at the sciences, the first return. I looked at prophecy. I saw the prophecy in the Old Testament, which was another evidence that Jesus was the Son of God. And then I saw the predictive prophecy in the New Testament about the second coming. And that became, Revelation became something I dove into, and to Daniel and to all the different prophetic books. And here's what I discovered really quick. Historically, there have been a lot of different views, and even currently, there is a ton of discrepancy about how it's all going to play out. Right now, most Americans would be familiar with what we would call the dispensational, pre-tribulation, premillennial view of the end times. And the reason that Americans currently would be aware of that is because of the series, The Left Behind book series. How many of you ever actually read that or know something about that? That is based on the dispensational, pre-tribulational view from Tim LaHaye. It is, I would say, probably right now, one of the most popular views. But by no means is it the only view. Now, here's what I'm going to do. I know some of you in here are like, you think you know, and maybe you do. Maybe you've done this study on this, but typically when people say, I think I know, it's because they've studied one view. They don't know the answers to that one view or the contrary views. A lot of people think they know. Other people think I ought to know because I'm a pastor. And after looking at all these views, here's the conclusion I've come to. There's holes in all of them that I can't reconcile, that don't necessarily make sense to me. So I'm not in this view of I'm not quite sure because I haven't read it or studied it. I'm in this perspective because I have. And so when I have to get up and preach about something that I'm not quite sure about how it's all going to play out, that makes me a little bit nervous. Can you understand why? There are some things that we can know, and we're going to talk about that. But there's some things that I'm not sure about. And so when and here's what really concerns me is we're a life group church. Most everybody's in a life group. You're in a small group of some kind. Some people have read it a lot. Some people have not. Some people think they know. Some people think we ought to know. Some people just don't even care. As we dive into this subject in our life groups, and we've created videos to help lead those groups. We've created, if you go to our app or our website, we've collected a bunch of resources that will show you graphs, and we actually did some podcasts, and so that we can help you start to get informed about this. We want you to do that, but my concern is as we dive into this subject, it could be a source of disunity, and that's the last thing that we want. Making sense to you? So I get concerned because there are some people that they've studied this area so much, and it's like they know, and they're going to tell everybody else, and there's very little humility, and usually because they haven't actually had to argue with somebody with an opposing view. I just want to make sure that we're unified as a church on the subject. So that concerns me a little bit. Thirdly, as we dive into this subject, I want to ask and answer this question. Okay, Jim, you're saying you're a little concerned. You studied it. You're not quite sure where where you stand on some of these issues. There's holes in each one of them. Then my question would be to you, Jim, why are you going to do a sermon series about it? And why, even beyond that, why are there so many versions? I mean, when it comes to so many doctrines, there isn't a ton of versions of it when it comes to historic Christianity. But in this one, there is. And why is that? Why are there so many versions? Why is it so hard to understand what's happening in all of that? And I want to give you some reasons for that, all right? First, I want you to know that there's discrepancy and there are differences of opinion on this subject for the reason that prophecy in and of itself was given by different prophets at different seasons or different parts of history that were looking ahead, and they were telling you about specific parts of the prophecy, not necessarily in chronological order. Okay, so you might get in Daniel a part of a future of the coming kingdom that deals with this slice in history. Well, another prophet that comes later actually goes to before that sort of slice of history, and they give different prophecies in different chronological order. And so you're not sure if they're talking about all this is happening at the same time, or is this happening at two separate times, but which happens first? And there's two perspectives here. There's the physical, literal perspective, meaning what's going on planet Earth, wars, these kinds of things, but there's also what's going on in heaven. The scriptures tell us that there's going to be a war in heaven, in the spiritual realm. There's also a war in the physical realm. So is this telling me something about the spiritual realm or the physical realm? And so when you're looking at it, you're not quite sure which goes into which. Now, the second thing that you need to understand about prophecy is, I don't know if you guys have ever, one of the books that we've got is called, it's basically The End Times for Dummies. We put that in the resource for you, but there's a graph there that I want you to see, and I want you to notice, if you were to look at the left view, prophecy, sometimes they tell a prophecy, and it looks like, if you were to put them together here, it looks like there isn't a lot of distance between the first two peaks. So they're telling prophecy, and it looks like there's a mountain, and everything happens at once. But as you come around to the side of it, you go, wait a minute, those peaks aren't actually aligned up. There's actually a distance to them. There's a gap between the two events that you couldn't see. I can't tell you, I've got for you men out there and women who hunt, you guys know what onyx is, right? Onyx is a map where you can actually put a place on the map of some place where you have a tree stand or you saw water, and so you can follow it, gives you a map back to that place. And I don't know about you, but if you zoom out of onyx, if I've got like 15 spots in a general area, if I go up to 50,000 feet, it looks like they're all one spot. But as I go further and further down, you can start to see it expands out, and now there's huge distances between the two. Depending on where you look at this from, at 50,000 square feet, it looks like they're right on top of each other. At 10 feet, they're 4 miles apart. Prophecy is from a heavenly perspective looking down, and so sometimes it looks like the events are the same, but when you read it and you get closer to it, they're actually further apart. By the way, you can totally see this in the Old Testament. It looked like the Messiah was going to come, and he was going to die and raise from the dead, and he was going to reign, and he was going to bring life, Isaiah 53. But when Jesus comes, he dies on the cross, raises from the dead, he goes away, and there's a church age. That's the time span between his first and second comings. When you get further back, you can't necessarily see that. But when you get in it, there's a gap there that now you start to see you didn't see before. Does this make sense to you? And so, prophecy isn't as clear cut. Now, when you read all the prophecy, you get the big picture. You're like, okay, I get that. This is going to happen. That's going to happen. I get that. But the time span and which is going to happen first and in what order is a little bit more difficult to catch. Now, you might go, well, why did God do that? Why wasn't he more clear on exactly how it was going to go? Well, let me give you a really good example for it. Remember that God allows free will and free choice. Remember that his enemy is the devil, Lucifer, who was once an angel who also had free choice. Lucifer rebelled against God, was thrown out of heaven, and he started in the Garden of Eden as the serpent. He's been deceiving and moving against God at every turn. Does that make sense to you? Now, I want you to imagine this. See, God wants us to know what's going on, but he's also dealing with an enemy who, if he gives too much detail, the enemy is going to be able to thwart God. So God gives us a clear picture, but he doesn't give out the entire detailed plan. Let me give you an example of this. Do you remember on the night that Jesus was betrayed, Jesus washed his disciples' feet, including Judas, and then it says in John chapter 13 that the devil prompted Judas to betray Jesus for 50 coins, silver coins. Do you remember that? Or 30 silver coins, 30 pieces of silver. Now, I want you to understand, if the devil would have understood that the plan was for Jesus to die for the sins of all men and then risen from the dead, would the devil have helped Judas participate in God fulfilling his prophecy in the Old Testament? Would the devil have joined in and participated? Absolutely not. The devil didn't quite understand how it was going to play out. And because of that, he thought he won. He's like, yes, I won. Jesus on the cross, resurrect from the dead. No, foiled again. Do you understand what's going on here? So you get the picture, and prophecy is meant to be understood looking back at it like this is what happened. They didn't get it. Do you remember the night that Jesus betrayed, he's crucified, he's in the tomb, Jesus raises from the dead, and everybody, remember the road to Emmaus, 2 of the disciples, as soon as it gets daylight, they take off. They're walking. Jesus walks up beside them and says, where are you guys going? And they didn't recognize him. And they said, and they're talking about the crucifixion. And Jesus said, what are you talking about? And they said, well, where have you been? Don't you know what happened? We thought he was the Messiah. And then Jesus opened up the scriptures to them and showed them that everything that had happened had actually been prophesied about. And their mind was blown. They went, whoa. And they got it. And it all fell into place. This was all prophesied. This is how it was supposed to go. We didn't see it. Do you see what I'm saying here? Prophecy, there's a mystery to it. And when you look at the Old Testament, there were so many prophecies about Jesus, and yet everybody missed it until after the fact, and then they went, oh my goodness, it was right there all the time. If that's how it was in the prophecy in the Old Testament, when Jesus came, when people try to go, I know how it's going to work, and I've got it figured out, if it's the same God, and he's still working against the devil who's trying to infiltrate and move and all this stuff, then I'm pretty sure if he worked that way in the past, I think it's not going to be quite as clear as we think it ought to be. Would you understand what I'm saying? His pattern is a little bit different than we want it to be. His mind, I don't know how he does it. He knows how people are going to choose. He allows free will, yet he knows what they're going to do advance. He works around. He's so beyond our thinking that it just blows our mind. So you've got to be really careful when you think you know how it's going to go. Right? I mean, there's a whole bunch of Christians that were prophesying that Donald Trump was going to win the presidency, and we know how it all goes. And guess what? You don't know what you think you know. So be careful and show some humility. Making sense to you? Yes. All right, so let me just say a couple of things. Just so you know that God works in this way, let me just give you this verse. This is in 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 10. Listen to this. Concerning this salvation, the prophets who spoke of the grace that was to come to you searched intently with the greatest care, trying to find out the time and circumstances to which the Spirit of Christ in them was pointing them when he predicted the sufferings of the Messiah and the glories that would follow. So here's what Peter's saying. These guys who prophesied these things about Jesus were also trying to go, when is this going to happen? How is this going to happen? They're prophesying, but they don't even necessarily understand the clearest details about how it was going to be played out. He goes on to say, it was revealed to them that they were not serving themselves, but you when they spoke of the things that have now been told to you by those who preach the gospel to you by the Holy Spirit in heaven. So you've got the prophets themselves. And in fact, he goes on to say that the angels themselves longed to look into these things. So you've got the angels in heaven who are trying to figure this out too. God knows, he's prophesied, you know how that's going to work, but how it all plays out, even the angels and the prophets were going, how is this going to work out? What's going to happen? They had the big picture, but the details confused them. They weren't sure. All right, so let me say it to you this way. In football, if you scouted a team, you knew they were a running team. Maybe you knew they were a specific kind of running team. You actually found out that they only ran 30 plays. 30 plays. You know they run 30 plays. Knowing that they run 30 plays doesn't mean you know which play they're going to play in the huddle. They're going to call. You don't know which play every single time, because if you did, you'd go, all right, everybody, they're going to run it over there. Get everybody off of that side. Let's all go over here. Here we are, and they'd be waiting for you. You know they're a running team, but you don't know the specific plays. In a sense, that is what God has done through prophecy. Now, that leads us to this. As we move into this subject matter, I want to make 3 points, because we're going to be doing this for 5 weeks. We're going to be doing this in life groups. For those of you who really want to scratch this itch, we've put some stuff out there for you to do that. But here's my desire as we get into this series. First, our desire as an eldership, as a staff, my desire is that we are a unified church. We are aligned together. And in order for that to happen, we're not going to agree on everything. For instance, some of you like hymns, some of you like choruses. But am I right on that? Some of you like it loud, some of you like it less loud.